Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling a really foundational document, the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union.
That's right.
It was solemnly proclaimed back in Nice, December 7th, 2000. Big moment, really. Parliament, Council, Commission, all involved.
Yeah, a major statement of core values, basically.
So our mission today, really, is to get under the skin of this charter. Understand those rights, those values it lays out.
And we're using the official text for this, the one published in the official journal back on December 18th, 2000. That's our source.
The first thing that jumped out at me, just flicking through the start, was all the different languages.
Oh, yeah.
Seeing it right there in, all the official languages at the time, it really hammers home the scale, the pan-European scope of this thing.
Definitely sets the scene.
Okay, so let's dive in. The preamble. What's the big picture they're painting right at the start?
Well, the preamble kicks off with this quite powerful idea. The peoples of Europe deciding, resolving to share a peaceful future based on common values.
So common ground from the outset.
Exactly. And it immediately says the union's built on these indivisible, universal values. We're talking human dignity, freedom, equality, solidarity. And these aren't just nice words. They're explicitly tied to democracy and the rule of law. That's the bedrock.
So it's about the union as a whole, but also, I guess, about the individual within it.
Precisely. The preamble really puts the individual at the heart of things. It talks about establishing union citizenship and creating this area of freedom, security, and justice.
Right.
It's sort of empowering the person within that shared European space.
And given how diverse the EU is, all those cultures, nations, that mention of respecting diversity must be pretty important.
Hugely important. The union aims to build on those shared values while respecting, Europe's cultural richness, its traditions, the national identities, how states are organized. And it looks forward to balanced, sustainable development and those fundamental freedoms of movement, people, goods, services, capital, the internal market stuff.
Now, the charter itself. Why did they feel they needed it then? It sounds like a lot of these ideas were already kind of floating around in the EU project.
That's a really good question. The preamble actually addresses that directly. It says the charter was needed to strengthen the protection of fundamental rights because society was changing.
Ah, okay.
Social progress, science, technology, things were moving fast. So the idea was to make these rights more visible, more accessible, maybe put them all in one clear document.
So less about inventing brand new rights and more like collecting and restating what was already understood.
Pretty much. The Charter is clear that it respects the Union's powers, subsidiarity, the idea that the EU only acts if national action isn't enough.
Right.
It mainly reaffirms rights already found in member state constitutions, international obligations, the EU treaties, the European Convention on Human Rights, social charters, court decisions. It's a pulling together, synthesis.
And there's that angle about rights coming with responsibilities, too,
Yeah.
isn't there? I think the preamble touches on that.
It does, yeah. It's crucial. Enjoying these rights isn't a free-for-all. It comes with duties towards others, towards the community, even towards future generations.
Yeah.
Rights and responsibilities, basically two sides of the same coin.
Okay, that sets the stage nicely.
Yeah.
Let's get into the specifics then. Chapter 1. Dignity. This feels like the absolute starting point, doesn't it?
It really is. Article 1 just lays it out there. Human dignity is inviolable. It must be respected and protected. Everything else flows from this. It's foundational.
And right after that, Article 2, the right to life.
Yes, and it's not just stating the right exists. It specifically bans the death penalty and execution. Full stop.
A clear red line for the EU.
Absolutely. A non-negotiable commitment to the sanctity of life.
Then Article 3 gets into the integrity of the person. And it gets quite detailed, especially around medicine and biology. What's going on there?
Well, Article 3 is interesting because it's tackling ethical questions head-on, the ones coming from medical and biological advances. So it demands free and informed consent for medical procedures. It prohibits eugenic practices, trying to select people based on characteristics.
Okay.
It bans making the human body a source of financial gain and explicitly outlaws reproductive cloning of humans.
Wow. Quite specific.
Yeah, it shows the Charter trying to protect dignity, even as science races ahead, raising some, pretty complex ethical issues.
Article 4 is very direct. Prohibition of torture, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment. Absolutely no exceptions.
None whatsoever. It's an absolute ban. Reflects that core commitment to humane treatment, always.
And Article 5 deals with some of the worst violations. Slavery, forced labor.
Yes, it bans slavery and servitude outright, and forced or compulsory labor. And importantly, it specifically calls out and prohibits trafficking in human beings,
Hmm.
recognizing it as a major assault on dignity and freedom, which unfortunately is still a big problem globally.
Okay, moving to Chapter 2, Freedoms. Article 6 kicks off with liberty and security of person. Seems pretty basic, but essential.
Absolutely essential. It protects you from arbitrary arrest, detention. It's a cornerstone of the rule of law, basically ensuring the state acts fairly.
Then Article 7, respect for private and family life, home, and communications. We hear a lot about this one now, don't we?
We do, and it's become so critical in our, super connected world. It shields you from unjustified intrusion by the state or anyone else really into your personal life, your home, your private messages, whether that's letters or emails or whatever.
Maintaining that personal space.
Exactly, a sphere of autonomy.
And flowing right from that is Article 8, protection of personal data. This feels quite ahead of its time, considering when it was written.
It really does. It saw the power and the risks of collecting and using personal data, so it sets down key principles. Data needs fair processing for specific reasons, usually with consent or a legal basis.
Right.
You have the right to see your data, correct it, and crucially, an independent authority needs to oversee it all. You can see the seeds of things like GDPR there.
Article 9 is about the right to marry and found a family, but it adds that phrase, according to the national laws governing the exercise of these rights. Why that little caveat?
That's an important detail. The Charter recognizes the right, yes, but the specifics, who can marry whom, the procedures, all that, those are left to the national laws of each member state.
So it respects the diversity in family law across the EU.
Exactly. It reflects different social and legal traditions.
Article 10 covers freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. Includes changing religion, manifesting it, and also conscientious objection, again linked to national laws. Why link the inner belief and the outward action?
Well, it protects both things, your private thoughts and beliefs, that inner space, and the freedom to express those beliefs outwardly, alone or with others, in public or private.
Okay.
And recognizing conscientious objection subject to national rules acknowledges how important individual conscience can be in a democracy.
Article 11 is freedom of expression and information, and it specifically points out media freedom and pluralism. Why call that out separately?
Because it's so vital for democracy. It's not just about having opinions, but also getting and sharing information and ideas freely without interference across borders. Mentioning media freedom and pluralism specifically highlights the essential role of a free, diverse press in, keeping power in check and fueling informed debate.
Article 12 covers peaceful assembly and association, and it highlights trade unions and political parties. Why focus on those two?
Well, the basic right is for people to gather peacefully and form groups, social, cultural, whatever.
Sure.
But mentioning trade unions recognizes their specific role in representing workers. And mentioning political parties at union level acknowledges their part in shaping the EU's democratic life and expressing citizens' political will.
And Article 13, freedom of the arts and sciences and academic freedom. This seems like a broad protection for creativity and knowledge.
It is. It recognizes that free artistic expression, scientific research, and the independence of universities are just fundamental for society to progress, innovate, and for individuals to flourish.
Article 14 is the right to education, including vocational training, free compulsory education, parents' rights. Covers a lot.
It really does. Establishes that broad right to learn throughout life. Free compulsory education aims for a basic standard for everyone.
Right.
And it also respects the freedom to set up schools and parents' rights to ensure education aligns with their beliefs, within national rules, of course.
Okay, shifting towards work and the economy. Article 15, freedom to choose an occupation, right to work. And it mentions people from outside the EU, too.
Yeah, it guarantees that basic right to pick your job. Plus, for EU citizens, the freedom to look for work, set up a business, offer services anywhere in the EU.
The free movement principle.
Exactly. Yeah. And importantly, it says legally working third country nationals should get working conditions equivalent to EU citizens, a measure of protection there too.
Article 16 is pretty straightforward. Freedom to conduct a business. Foundational for the market economy.
Absolutely. It just enshrines that principle of economic freedom, letting people and companies start and run businesses as long as they follow the relevant EU and national rules.
Then the right to property in Article 17 covers ownership, use, inheritance, and specifically intellectual property too. Why add intellectual property?
Well, the main part protects your lawfully owned possessions from being taken arbitrarily, needs public interest, fair compensation.
Okay.
Adding intellectual property patents, copyright, that sort of thing, specifically recognizes how important those rights are for encouraging innovation and creativity in the economy.
Article 18 is the right to asylum, referencing the Geneva Convention. Why bring in that international agreement?
By pointing explicitly to the Geneva Convention, it anchors the EU's approach to asylum firmly within the established international standards for protecting refugees.
So global standards apply.
Yes, ensuring those fleeing persecution are treated according to that widely accepted framework.
And the last one in freedoms, Article 19, protects people against removal, expulsion, extradition. Bans collective expulsions and sending people somewhere they risk death or torture seems vital.
Absolutely vital. It sets crucial safeguards, reinforcing the commitment to human rights, even in really difficult situations like deportation. And banning collective expulsions means each case has to be looked at individually. Due process.
Right. Okay, Chapter 3 moves us to equality. Article 20 starts simply. Equality before the law. Simple, but huge.
Foundational, isn't it? Everyone treated equally by the legal system. No bias, no discrimination. Cornerstone of a just society.
And Article 21 really spells out the non-discrimination grounds. It's a long list: sex, race, color, origin, genetics, language, religion, belief, opinion, minority status, property, birth, disability, age, sexual orientation. Why be so exhaustive?
Being so specific shows a really deep commitment to fighting all kinds of discrimination. Listing them out like that means vulnerable groups are explicitly covered, giving a clear legal basis to challenge unfair treatment across the board. And it also bans discrimination based on nationality, within the scope of the EU treaties, of course.
Article 22 then talks about respecting cultural, religious, and linguistic diversity. Feels essential for holding the EU together.
Totally. It's a formal commitment to valuing all the different identities within the Union, seeing that diversity as a strength, really.
Article 23 is equality between men and women, and it actually allows for measures favoring the underrepresented sex. That's quite proactive.
It is. Mandates equality in all areas: work, pay, etc. But that bit about positive action acknowledges that sometimes you need specific measures to fix existing imbalances and get to real equality on the ground.
Article 24 focuses on the rights of the child, emphasizes their best interests, their right to be heard, highlights their specific needs.
Yes, it puts the child's best interest first in any action affecting them, guarantees protection, care, the right to express views considering their age, obviously, and the right to keep contact with both parents unless that's bad for them.
Then the rights of the elderly in Article 25, dignity, independence, participation, acknowledging older people's place.
Exactly. Recognizes their value, their contributions, and affirms their right to live with dignity, independence, and be active in society.
And Article 26 specifically addresses persons with disabilities, aiming for independence, integration, participation, promoting inclusion.
Yeah, commits the Union to measures that help people with disabilities be autonomous, integrated socially and at work, and participate fully in community life. It's about removing barriers.
Okay, Chapter 4 takes us into solidarity. Article 27 kicks off with workers' right to information and consultation at work. Seems like transparency.
It is. Recognizes that workers should be informed and consulted about things affecting them in their workplace, following EU and national rules, fosters a more collaborative environment.
Article 28 is the right of collective bargaining and action, including the right to strike. That's a big one for labor relations.
Definitely. Protects the right for workers and employers or their organizations to negotiate conditions and take collective action, including strikes, to defend their interests during disputes.
Article 29 is about access to placement services, helping people find jobs.
It just ensures everyone has the right to access free services that help match job seekers with vacancies. Practical support.
Article 30 gives protection against unjustified dismissal. A bit of job security.
Yes, grants workers protection against unfair dismissal, according to the relevant laws, a safeguard against arbitrary firing.
Fair and just working conditions are in Article 31: health, safety, dignity, working hours, rest, paid leave, aiming for decent work-life balance.
Pretty much sets basic standards: respect for health, safety, dignity at work, plus limits on hours, rest periods, paid holidays, promotes healthier, more sustainable work.
Article 32 specifically bans child labor and protects young workers, acknowledges their vulnerability.
Yes, sets a firm ban on child labor, usually tied to school leaving age, but allows for rules protecting young people who do work proper conditions, protection from exploitation or harmful work.
Article 33 is about protecting family life, legal, economic, social protection, and specific things like protection from dismissal around maternity, paid maternity leave, parental leave, balancing work and family.
Exactly. Recognizes family life's importance. Safeguards against dismissal for pregnancy, maternity, guarantees paid maternity leave, and parental leave rights to help people manage work and family.
Social Security and social assistance in Article 34, a safety net, basically.
Yeah, recognizes the right to benefits and services for things like maternity, illness, old age, unemployment. Also, social and housing help for those without enough resources to ensure a decent life. And this applies to legal residents and people moving within the EU.
The right to health care in Article 35 includes preventive care and integrating health protection into all EU policies. Sounds quite holistic.
It is. Guarantees access to preventive care and medical treatment under national systems, but also mandates high health protection across all EU policies, recognizing health isn't just about healthcare.
Article 36 is access to services of general economic interest, energy, transport, etc., promoting cohesion.
Yes, acknowledges that access to these essential services, as defined by national and EU law, is important for social and geographical unity across the Union, a basic level of service for everyone.
Environmental protection is Article 37, integrating it into policies based on sustainable development, looking to the future.
Yeah, commits the Union to high environmental protection, continuous improvement, and making sure environmental thinking is part of all policies based on sustainability for us and future generations.
And the last one in solidarity, Article 38, high level of consumer protection, safeguarding people in the marketplace.
Correct. Mandates that Union policies must ensure strong protection for consumers, recognizing their rights when they buy goods or services, aims for fair markets.
Okay, Chapter V moves to citizens' rights. Article 39, right to vote and stand in European Parliament elections. Core democratic participation.
Absolutely. Lets any EU citizen vote and be a candidate in EP elections where they live, same conditions as nationals of that country, fundamental for EU democracy.
And Article 40 does the same for local municipal elections. Lets people participate locally, even if they're not nationals there.
Yes, extends that participation to the local level where people live, whatever their EU nationality. Fosters engagement.
Article 41 is the right to good administration. Lots in there. Impartiality, fairness, reasonable time, right to be heard, access files, reasons for decisions, plus compensation for damage by EU institutions.
Sure.
Promotes accountability.
It really lays down the ground rules for how EU institutions should behave. Fair, transparent, efficient. Being heard before negative decisions, seeing your file, getting reasons, seeking compensation if things go wrong.
Right.
Plus that right to use any official language to contact institutions and get a reply in the same one.
Article 42 is access to documents. Parliament, Council, Commission. Key for transparency again.
Vital. Empowers citizens and residents by letting them see official documents, allowing more scrutiny of how decisions are made.
Article 43 introduces the Ombudsman, a way to complain about maladministration outside the courts.
An important alternative route, yes. Lets people complain to an independent body if they think an EU institution, except the courts acting judicially, has messed up.
And Article 44, the right to petition the European Parliament, another direct channel for citizens.
Exactly. Lets individuals or groups raise issues directly with their MEPs on matters within the EU's remit. Strengthens that citizen link.
Freedom of movement and residence, Article 45, huge one for EU citizens.
Absolutely massive. Guarantees that right to live and move freely across member states. Opens up so many opportunities. And it mentions potentially extending this to legally resident third country nationals too, though that's complex.
And the last citizen's right, Article 46.
Yeah.
Diplomatic and consular protection. Practical help abroad.
Yeah, if your own country doesn't have an embassy or consulate where you are outside the EU, you can go to any other member state's embassy for help, just like their own citizens would. EU solidarity in action.
Okay, Chapter 6, Justice. Starts with Article 47, right to an effective remedy and a fair trial. Absolutely fundamental.
Couldn't be more fundamental. Guarantees if your EU rights are violated, you can go to an independent court. And it sets out fair trial basics. Public hearing, reasonable time, impartial judge, legal advice, representation, legal aid if needed.
Article 48 is presumption of innocence and rights of the defense. Vital safeguards.
Absolutely critical in criminal justice. Innocent until proven guilty by law. And the accused person's defense rights must be fully respected all the way through.
Article 49 covers legality and proportionality of offenses and penalties. No retroactive punishment. Punishment fits the crime.
Crucial limits. Can't be punished for something that wasn't a crime when you did it. Can't get a heavier penalty than was applicable then. If the penalty gets lighter later, you get the benefit. And penalties must always be proportionate to the offense.
And Article 50, the nibis sin idem principle. can't be tried or punished twice for the same thing in the EU.
Core justice principle. Once you've been finally acquitted or convicted for something in one EU country according to law, you can't face trial or punishment for that same offense again elsewhere in the Union. Legal certainty.
Right. Finally, Chapter 7, General Provisions. Article 51 defines the scope, applies to EU institutions and member states only when implementing EU law. Doesn't give the EU new powers. Why draw those lines?
It's crucial for knowing how the Charter works in practice. It clarifies it's mainly for the EU institutions and only binds member states when they're acting under EU law, respects the division of powers, subsidiarity.
Okay.
Saying it doesn't create new EU powers reinforces that balance.
Article 52 is about the scope of the rights themselves, allows limitations under strict conditions, and clarifies the relationship with EU treaties and the European Convention on Human Rights. How does it stop limitations being, well, arbitrary?
It sets really strict conditions. Limitations must be set by law, respect the core essence of the right, be necessary and proportionate, and genuinely meet general interest goals or protect others' rights.
Tight conditions.
Very. And it says rights from the treaties follow treaty limits. Rights corresponding to the ECHR have the same meaning and scope, though EU law can offer more protection, just not less.
Article 53 sets the level of protection. Basically, the Charter can't be used to lower existing human rights standards. Aims high.
Exactly. It's a safety net. Ensures the Charter doesn't accidentally weaken rights already protected by EU law, international law like the ECHR or national constitutions. It's about maintaining or improving protection.
And the very last one, Article 54, prohibits abuse of rights. Can't use the Charter to undermine the rights it protects. Stops it being twisted.
Yeah, an important safeguard. Makes clear you can't interpret the Charter as giving you a right to do things aimed at destroying or unfairly limiting the very rights and freedoms it recognizes. Protects its integrity.
Wow. Well, that was quite the journey through the Charter of Fundamental Rights. It's really striking just how broad it is, covering dignity, freedoms, equality, solidarity, citizens' rights, justice.
It really covers a vast amount of ground, doesn't it?
It really does. It shapes so many aspects of life, from the deeply personal to how we interact with, the institutions.
It truly serves as that fundamental framework, doesn't it? Spelling out the core values, the essential rights that the EU is built on, affecting the daily lives of everyone living there.
Yeah.
And it's not static. I mean, it's constantly being interpreted, applied by courts. It's a living document, a key reference point.
It really makes you stop and think, doesn't it? How these rights impact our daily lives here in the EU, often in ways we probably don't even notice. And with the world changing so fast, those ongoing debates about what these rights mean now, how they apply, they feel incredibly important. It leaves you with that question, maybe. What responsibility does this knowledge place on us as individuals and on the institutions supposed to uphold these rights?
That's a really powerful thought to end on.
A lot to mull over. Thanks so much for walking us through that. It was fascinating.